Okay, so welcome to the what calligraphy style is what, and it's going to be a pretty much a lecture and a show and tell. So I will be talking a lot, nothing unusual, and I'm going to be showing you and discussing different styles, things that I teach, and also about calligraphy styles in general. So and also showing you different pens because it's pretty confusing. And the way that I always kind of describe it is when I go into disc chem and I need to buy shampoo, and then I'm standing there. Okay, so you have this really wide aisle. I'm there, I'm human, I have hair. Okay, so honestly, shampoos on me are not friends because I don't know what to buy. I don't know if should I spend lots of money? Do I get a brand name that I know? Do I get some cheapy one? Do I get for thick hair, for dyed hair, for curly? It's like that. So brush lettering, traditional calligraphy, dipping pens, all these things are so confusing for people. And they will always message me and say, I'd like to do your calligraphy course, or I'd like to learn calligraphy. My first question is, what style do you want? And then they always come back and say, I don't know. And, you know, well, what do you suggest for a beginner? So it's such a difficult thing for me to suggest because it also depends on what you like. You may not like a traditional style. You may want brush lettering, but you end up actually preferring traditional calligraphy once you try it. So that's why I thought, let me do this session and chat about all the different styles available. I'm going to start off by just going through what I teach and then touching on other traditional calligraphy styles. So there are a lot of them out there and there's quite a lot of history around them. I'm not going to go into the history too much. I think I'm going to do that as a separate session on another day, because I thought I'd go into a little bit of history. And then when I started researching, oh my word, that could be 2 days of talking just on its own, just the history of writing in general, never mind calligraphy. So I'm going to briefly touch on, for instance, when I chat about Gothic and copperplate and italics, just where those styles came from and, you know, more or less when they started and how they started. Just going to first talk about the basic differences. So traditional calligraphy would be any of the older styles. Just to give you an idea, this is what I teach. This is from my notes. So this is a sheet. If you just course with me, you'd get notes like this, including practice sheets, which would be all of my notes. You get all of my courses. You get practice sheets. So for instance, there's all the letters down the side. But this is the basic italic style. So, and then of course, quick brown fox, which is a pangram. And if you're not sure what a pangram is, it's a sentence that has every letter of the alphabet in it. So the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. If you've ever done any calligraphy, Western calligraphy, you probably would have written this out and the word minimum. So I did, I'm self-taught in most styles, but this italic style I did years and years ago. And quick brown fox and the word minimum, and people always laugh when I say minimum because that's the word that we all had to write out because it's, I don't know why, there's something about it that calligraphy teachers like. So that is italics, and that's the style that I mostly teach for traditional. I just want to show you for just for some samples, because I pulled out all my hundreds of samples here with the traditional styles. That italic style is what I would call sort of like a nice certificate style. So there's an example of a certificate. This was a leftover one. I did a whole lot for a school. And this is quite a nice sort of easy to read and easy to write style. So here's another example of, I hope it's not too bright. It's looking very bright on my side. Okay, there we go. This is also italic style. I'm going to demo that just now as well, but that's also the same sort of style. Lots and lots of flourishes compared to the certificate one. And then obviously when I teach you, I'm teaching the very basic style, and from there you can add all sorts of flourishes in that. So that is the italic style that you would do with a flat-ended pen. So I teach with, I teach using the Lamy fountain pens, mainly because they're easy to use and people like them. They're great to write with. There's no mess, there's no fuss, they're easy. So these are my workshop pens, and you can use markers. There's lots of different types of calligraphy pens. So I'll show you that just now. But that's one of the traditional styles. Then another one is Gothic. So Gothic, the easiest way for you to think of Gothic, because sometimes people are not sure what I'm talking about. If you look at the Sunday Times newspaper and you look at the heading, that is Gothic. That word, or the 3 words, the Sunday Times. or Sunday times, that is proper Gothic. So I do teach that as well, not often because there's not a lot of call for that. So Gothic, if you like the idea of Gothic, it's a very rigid, very structured style. It's coming from Germany, no surprise. Lots of rigid discipline going on there, as opposed to the Italic style, which is coming from Italy, so it's a bit more flowy. The Gothic style, I am not a major fan of it personally. I mean, I don't sit and write in Gothic for fun. I teach it because I know how to teach it, but honestly, it's quite an inflexible style, as in you can't really add flourishes and all sorts of pretty things. It's got a lot of quite strict rules, and that is what appeals to some people. They actually like the fact that it's quite rigid and quite structured. So when I say I don't like it, I get bored with it quickly. So, and I find that unless you really understand the style quite well, it's a very difficult style to work in, because you've got a lot of very structured little blocks, and it's quite geometric. The other version of that is fracture, which looks like this. This is a softer, fractured version. So the word fracture is coming from, I've got some other examples. It's actually coming from the word fracture. So there's another one that I've written out. That's fracture. You can see here a lot more flowy. There's a lot more room for playing around with the letters. Still got a sort of a Gothic look to it, but you're not so restricted by the letter forms. Here's another one that's I've written out. These are all just bits and pieces. So that one, you can see how dramatic that R is. So that's got a Gothic sort of look to it, but it's got a softer flow than true Gothic. So, or the true black letter, the Gothic black letter. So Gothic is actually a period in history. And the Gothic black letter style is the more geometric sort of structured one, and then fractures come from that. Here's another example, also a very big flowy B, and softer letters with more breaks in them. So when people want to learn fracture, I always suggest they rather learn the Gothic black letter, the textura quadrata. And textura quadrata, it's the square text. The quadrata is the word for square, and then textura, the text. So this is the fracture, and then textura quadrata would be the more structured one, the Sunday Times one. If you're not sure, quickly Google Sunday Times. I don't really have an example. As you can see, I don't really write in Gothic. I do have notes that I don't have with me, but it's a fairly easy style to learn. It's just quite rigid, and it's not the kind of thing you're going to use for writing a birthday card to your gran, or writing a quick thank you note. It's something that people learn because they're drawn to that style. So I think that's also why I don't end up teaching it often, because people generally want to learn styles that are more useful and that are also more flowy and sort of prettier. This is another one that is also done in the fracture style, and you can see it is a little bit flowier, but still quite rigid and quite structured. And that's done with a Pilot parallel pen. So for these bigger styles where I've written like this size, for example, this is done with a Pilot parallel pen, and I'll show you those pens just now, I'll write with them just now, but it's a pen, it's this pen here. So quite a lot of times people say, oh yes, I know those pens, or I have those pens, but they don't always know what to do with them. And they've got different sizes on the end, the numbers, and then that's 6 mil. There's my thumb by comparison. That is a really, really big nib. So it's going to give you a very big size of writing. This one here, which makes the word red look very tiny. See, I'm writing whatever ink color I've got, I've written those words. I've just noticed that now. This is so big. It's a 13 millimeter wide nib. Now, you can't fit that onto a fountain pen. And that's actually a dipping pen nib that I've dipped into ink and then written with. So quite a fun style, quite flowy and swishy for this type of style, but again, one of the more traditional styles. Okay, so that is, oh yeah, just one last thing. This one here is the Italic style, written with a dipping pen. So that's got the Italic sort of traditional Italic style here, a little bit of a stylized thing going on with the capitals, and done with a dipping pen, dipped into Winsor & Newton calligraphy ink. These others were all done with pens and inks. or like fountain pens and fountain penning. So this is done with a Lamy fountain pen, quite fine compared to the other ones that I've just shown you. So I'll show you those pens now as well. All right, so that is the traditional calligraphy. There's also copperplate, which I don't teach. Okay, so there's a little bit of confusion about copperplate. People see these pens and they think copperplate. So true copperplate. So I teach modern calligraphy, which is this style here. So to me, it's a slightly more modern version. Copperplate, in its true sense, is very, very angled. It sits at about a 55-degree angle on the page, and it's extremely difficult to master. Lots and lots of rules, very, very structured, and something that I don't teach because I haven't spent enough time learning it. You need to be extremely good to teach copperplate. I wouldn't even go there, and I don't enjoy sitting writing all day. I like teaching. So for me to teach something like copperplate, far too much work on my part to get to a level where I would feel confident to teach. Whereas these other styles are a lot easier. I just want to show you, I've got a book. This is a stunning book. Just by the way, if you need a book for, this is Italic and copperplate. Beautiful, beautiful book. A lot of my students have bought it as well. But I just want to show you, here is pretty much the difference between italics at the top and copperplate at the bottom. And you can see the difference in the angle. Copperplate is very, very elegant. It's got a beautiful flow to it. It's very popular for wedding calligraphy, that kind of thing. You would actually not use this oblique nib. So the oblique holder is this thing that sits on the side like that. So you actually wouldn't use that. You would use a straight holder, which is where you put your nib in straight like this. But you wouldn't use one of these nibs. They're very specific nibs that you would use for copperplate. Quite a finicky style, pretty difficult to master. Takes a lot of discipline, and as I say, I wouldn't even begin to teach it. There are a lot of people teaching it, not in Joburg, well, not in South Africa, but online. There's a guy called Paul Antonio, and he is amazing for copperplate. So I would suggest, if you're interested in true copperplate, which is not this, okay, then I would suggest following him, and you'll learn quite a lot from him. I've learned quite a lot from him, but it's also just not something that I'm particularly drawn to. It's a little bit too finicky and too all the little flourishes and that. It's not really my thing, and if you like that, it's definitely a very rewarding style to write in, because it is something that if you practice, you definitely see results. All right, so those are the older styles, well, that I teach and that I don't teach copperplate. But I also want to show you, just on my notes here, there are other older styles that are kind of familiar. One of them is uncials. So the uncials is another style that I don't teach, but it is quite a familiar looking style. I'm just going to block half of this off because I printed out examples, because I don't have written examples. This I just pulled off Google. So that's an example of uncials. If you look at that A, you can actually see that's quite a typical example of uncials. The A is quite different. It's almost got a capital look all the way through. So this is what's known as a Meduscule style. Majuscules are the capitals. Minuscules are the smaller ones. So uncial is a very, very old style, and that was actually coming from the 4th century AD. So the Romans developed the script. The word uncial means 1 inch. That's what it comes from, the word uncial, which means 1 inch. And I would imagine everything was written 1 inch high, that size. So this was a style that the Romans developed. It then was adopted by, under the Celtic, this kind of became like the Irish style, the Book of Kells, a couple of the other very famous books. The monks loved uncials. That style, if you look at this style, it has that Celtic look to it, and that's because they actually adopted it and it became their official style. So uncial is quite an old script. And then what happened is, from uncials, it went and evolved into the Carolingian style. I'm going to hold this up now. I'm going to show you both pages. So the Carolingian style is this at the bottom. You can see the A is kind of similar, but it's got a more rounded look to it. And also you've got definite capitals and small letters, and you've got tops and tails. So the ascenders and the descenders. So that is coming from Charlemagne, who was, where are my notes? there's a history lesson now. And I'm not going to go into it too much. It's just interesting how the one sort of led into the next. So this Carolingian style is coming from the Charlemagne era, and that is from the 8th century. So by the end of the 8th century, uncials was not quite as popular. And then what happened is so many different people had been writing out text. And you can imagine there was no internet, there was no Google, there was none of that. And this person would write something out, and that person would write something out, and different things are happening in different countries. A lot of these scripts were becoming very kind of messy, and people had added in their own bits and pieces. So what happened is Charlemagne, he decided enough of that, he wants a standardized script. So he employed someone to go and kind of make a standard script, and that is what the Carolingian script was. So Carolingian is this bottom one here, and the word is coming from Carl, so Charlemagne was King Charles, and Carl is the German version of Charles. So that's kind of where the Carolingian is Carl. It's like a version of his name. And what happened is he then had this style, and that was the style. So for 11th century, 12th century, and so on and so on, that was the style. And then by about the 12th century, the Germans, they started with the Gothic lettering. So what happened with the Carolingian style, if you look at the style, it's quite a rounded, easy to read, flowy sort of style, a bit more flowy than this style. And then the Germans started compressing it. So the style got narrower and narrower and more compressed. And out of that came the Gothic black letter. So that Gothic style was a lot narrower and a lot more economical on the page. So parchment and all these things I were writing on wasn't so easy to find. And so when you're wanting to write a lot on a smallish page, or you've got limited amounts of paper or parchment, the Gothic black letter is very compressed. So that's kind of became a very easy, well, to me, Gothic, it's quite geometric, but before it became very geometric, it was a bit flowier. So they kind of compressed it, wrote more and more on a page. And that was one of the reasons, is because of needing space. So the Gothic style came out of the Carolingian style. And so it carried on like that. And then what happened is the Gothic was very popular in Northern Europe. And in Italy, the Italic style, which is the one that I teach, that became more popular. So the Italic style developed out of Gothic, out of that very rigid, very angular style. But it was also because in the Vatican, they were needing to write all these papal documents and so on. And the Italians said, no, we don't like the Gothic style. It was far too rigid and far too structured. So the Italians decided they needed a softer, flowier style. If you know anything about Italians, that makes sense. If you see Gothic writing, it looks very Germanic. It doesn't look very Italian. So you can kind of imagine how that happened. And they took that sort of narrow, structured form, but they softened it, and everything just became a lot more flowy. And then out of that came the Chancery Script, and Chancery was, it was just like it became the Gothic, so either the Italics, so it kind of flowed into the Italics, and that's also why it's called Italics, it's coming from the Italian. And then from that, we ended up with copperplate. So the copperplate came from the time when we started with the printing presses, and then they were actually engraving onto copper plate. So if you think of the printing process, you need to engrave into a plate. You then got ink, and then it's printing onto a page. So with the copperplate style, previously for printing, what they had was wooden blocks that they would carve into. So then the wider nibs, if you think of the Gothic, it's a very chunky style. The uncials, all very kind of chunky wide strokes. The copperplate, where you're engraving into those copper plates, that meant that they could do a lot finer engraving, lots of curls, lots of flourishes. So copperplate as a writing style, there are many different copperplate styles, but it became a type of writing, and it's coming from that time. So then what happened is all these scribes, so calligraphers were known as scribes back then, and they were all competing to see who could do the curliest, most fancy flourishes, and the copperplate styles came from that. So copperplate, if you look at this book here on the front, that B is a typical copperplate B, very curly, very ornate. These nibs, when you write with one of these nibs, there are 2 points, okay, not as chunky as my fingers, but two very, very fine points that when you apply pressure on the page, they split. And that is how you would get this thick and this thin. It's as the nib splits and then it goes around like that. But they were able to replicate that in the printing on the copper plate, the actual printing plate. So that's how copperplate kind of came to be. But copperplate as a writing style, people say, oh, I'm doing copperplate, I'm learning copperplate, but it's actually more kind of the name of those styles. So the English roundhand is actually the correct name for this style that I keep showing in this book, that sort of rounded, very ornate style. And then there's Spencerian Script, and Spencerian Script was developed in America. So that is another style that a lot of people have heard of, but they're not sure what it is. And that's like the American version of one of the copperplate styles, developed by a man whose surname was Spencer. So the Spencerian Script was developed from about 1840 to 1850, and then he pushed that hard. So he got his script into all the, became the sort of accepted style of writing for schools, for documents. The Coca-Cola logo, the Ford logo, those are all in that Spencerian Script. So if you think of Coca-Cola and you look at how it's written, you can see it's got that thin into thick. I mean, that's a very, very famous logo, and it hasn't changed in all these years. And that is Spencerian. And that's one of the copperplate, it falls under the copperplate umbrella. So those are styles that I don't teach, basically because they are pretty finicky to learn, and I wouldn't feel confident to teach those, because I need to learn them properly. This, however, is a much more fun, much more modern version. So this is what would be known as modern calligraphy, but it's with a pointed pen. So this is a pointed pen versus a brush pen, which a brush pen is going to give you a brush lettered look. So a brush lettered look is, I'll show you some examples now. That is the thing I teach the most, and it's probably the most popular style. Certainly in South Africa, it's becoming one of the more popular styles to learn. And brush lettering, both of these examples happen to be with white ink on dark paper, but obviously you can work in any color ink that you like. You can see this one's got a little bit more of a sort of modern bouncy look to it. This is a little bit more classic. And these are coming from that copperplate type of writing, that very slanted, very elegant, very structured style. What I like about these modern styles is you can kind of put in your own personality, you can add flourishes, you can do whatever you like with them, and it's a lot more fun and playful than the more rigid styles. Okay, so the other thing that happened with in the 19th century is that metal pens became more popular. So these pens, if you think of dipping pens, these little nibs that you'd put into a holder, they became very popular. Then fountain pens became popular. I mean, today we have so many pens available, but you can imagine way back when it was the feather, and you had to go and find the feather and cut the feather and prepare the feather. So those calls were not always so easy to find. So writing was something that wasn't accessible to everyone. And then as it became more accessible, I think people just wanted an easier, more, just a faster flowing style of writing. So then cursive became quite popular. So the Spencerian style in America, that sort of developed into a different cursive that they've got now. So they don't still write in that Spencerian style, but it's got the American cursive, like they do their R's differently to us. There's certain things that are different to the way we would do our cursive in South Africa. So it's just interesting how all these styles have kind of emerged and adapted and evolved over the years. Okay, so then just to touch on some other calligraphy styles, I'm not going to go into it in too much detail, but a lot of people tend to think, oh, calligraphy, and then they think it looks like this, that's calligraphy. So that is, but there's also a lot of other styles. So you get Arabic calligraphy, that's probably one of the most well-known ones. There is also the Chinese calligraphy. So if you think of Chinese calligraphy, it is done with a brush, and it's got a very soft, flowy sort of look to it. Looks very pretty. I have no idea what I'm reading when I look at it. It looks lovely, but you kind of think, oh, well, that's Chinese calligraphy. There are so many different kinds. There's also, under the Chinese calligraphy umbrella, there's Japanese calligraphy, Korean calligraphy, Vietnamese calligraphy has also come out of that, but they all started originally with the Chinese calligraphy, and they've all evolved from there. So if you look at Japanese calligraphy, or Japanese writing even, and Chinese writing, you'll see there's a difference, and it follows through to the calligraphy as well. Korean calligraphy also has a different look. So all of those styles are also tied in with national identity. So the Japanese didn't want their calligraphy to look exactly like the Chinese, but it was evolved from the Chinese originally. And with the Chinese calligraphy and Japanese and Korean, you're using, you've probably seen it, you get an ink stick, and it's like a little block of ink, I suppose. And you take what's called an ink stone. It's like this little, like a well thing. You put water in it and you rub the ink stone into it, and you keep adding water until you've got the right consistency for ink. So that is the way that they will make the ink. And then they're using a brush and they're putting that into the ink, and then they're doing calligraphy with that brush. So the brush pens that I would use for teaching are sort of a pen version of those brushes. So I am not 100% sure, but I would imagine, just find my brush pens. I have a lot of pens lying here. So if you look at like this little tombow, for instance, on the side here, you've got Japanese letters, and this is a Fudenoshiki pen. The word food, F-U-D-E, which is on here, is actually the word for brush. So Fudenoshiki, I'm not sure what the rest of it means, but you get different pens. So this is the tombow one, is the Fudenoshiki. You get the Fudebiyori and the Fude. The other brands have different ones, but they all have that word food in, the F-U-D-E. So I'm imagining that that is coming from the fact that it's a brush. This is the pen version of a small brush. So when you write with this, it has that sort of brush feel to it. But with the Chinese and Japanese and Korean calligraphy, they are working with those ink stones. So I work with black sumi ink. So when I teach dipping pen, where's my pen? When I work with these pens here, I would work with black sumi ink. That sumi ink is made from soot. So what happens is there are, apparently, I'm not 100% sure, but I've been told that there are big rooms where they're burning oil. So they'll burn vegetable oil, and they collect the soot, scrape that off the walls. They collect the soot, and that is what is made into those oils. So if I had to take this oil now and put a few drops of it into, this ink, and put a few drops into water, it actually creates an oily surface. So this is a very, it's very waterproof. It's known as the blackest of black inks. It is solid black. You will not, it's as black if you work on white paper as this is white on black. It is solid black. So the ink that they're using from the ink stick is a very, it's the sort of ultimate ink. This bottled ink made in a factory, okay, I've decanted it, it comes out of a bigger bottle. That is like the one used for practicing, and it's not considered to be very, very posh. If you're wanting to do proper, I suppose it's Eastern calligraphy, you would use the ink stick and the little thing, and it's got a little slanted surface so that the water sits there, and then as you rub the ink stick, you create the ink. So it's almost like a meditation when you watch people painting, and well, to me it looks like they're painting. They're actually doing calligraphy with the brushes. And what's so interesting is I have done brush lettering where I've used these pens with Chinese people who were raised in China and are here on contract work. Well, the husbands are here on contract work, and I did a workshop about 3 years ago with a whole lot of Chinese ladies and some teenagers. And the first thing they did, I showed them the pens. We hadn't even started. I hadn't shown them how to use this pen. Now, I would hold this pen like this, and I would write this way for brush lettering. The first thing they all did is they held the pen like this, up like that. And I thought that was so interesting. I've never seen a Western person do that. They immediately all took the pen and they wanted to write like this. Now, that doesn't suit the our alphabet, the ABC that I would teach. It actually suits the Chinese style of writing, the Chinese characters. So I just thought that was quite interesting. But so those are that's the Chinese calligraphy, and then the derivatives. You also get Vietnamese calligraphy, but that's kind of gone into a more cursive type of style. If you're interested in Vietnamese calligraphy, it's got a very specific look. All of this is available easily on Google. So if you're interested in anything specifically, you can go and have a look. Then there is also Tibetan calligraphy, which I did not know about until a couple of years ago when I started teaching. Tibetan calligraphy is beautiful. It looks like this. And I just pulled this picture off, but that's a very sort of classic example of what Tibetan calligraphy looks like. Very angular, but also quite graceful, and it's got a lovely look to it. So there are quite a few people on Instagram, Tibetan calligraphy artists that you can follow. Their work is amazing. And often it's big and it's on walls and it's got a very, very bold look to it. Okay, then there is the Georgian calligraphy, which is coming from the country Georgia, not the state in America. And that, I'm just going to show you this one. It's underneath the Tibetan. You can actually see the difference. Very curly, it's coming from the Georgian languages. So also very old style of calligraphy. Obviously, I don't teach these. I'm just showing you as an example. Then there are the Islamic calligraphy styles. So Islamic calligraphy, and I may be wrong, so because I have gone and researched all of this, but sure, there's so much information. But what they've said here, what I've got, I just made some brief notes, is to me, Arabic calligraphy would be the most common or most sort of popular style. And Arabic calligraphy obviously is Islamic calligraphy, but also included in that is the Persian, Ottoman, and Indian calligraphy. So Persian and Ottoman I could understand, but Indian calligraphy, I would have thought it's coming from a sort of Hindu background, but again, I'm not 100% sure. And this is also not meant to be too much of a history lesson. So I'm not too sure about the Indian, but Indian calligraphy has a much more rounded, in fact, it looks fairly similar to that Georgian style. To me, it's not like this exactly, but it's got those sort of rounded, the Tamil style letters. But the Arabic calligraphy is a very old style that has been around for hundreds of years. And it's very closely tied in with the Quran, and it's a very old style. So I'm not going to go into that too much. As South Africans, every mosque you see, apparently I haven't been into a mosque, but apparently they've got beautiful paintings on the ceilings and lots of Arabic calligraphy in the buildings and the structures. So yeah, I have a student, he's Muslim and he's a contractor. He does all the windows and all the aluminium windows for a lot of the mosques. And he says, wow, he said, you can't believe some of the artwork, and it's all the writing in these mosques. So that would be amazing to see. But Islamic calligraphy, the Arabic calligraphy, you're working the opposite direction. Hebrew as well, I don't know about Hebrew calligraphy, I haven't even looked into that, but Hebrew, you're also working the opposite, you're writing the opposite direction to the Western calligraphy. So that's as much history as I'm going to go into now. If you have questions, you're welcome to ask. A lot of the stuff, if you're interested, it is on the internet. And I think I probably will study some more and then do an actual, like a little session on that. So I'm going to show you brush lettering, and then I'm going to do some samples for you, some examples for you now. So with brush lettering, the main difference between the brush lettering style and the traditional style. So brush lettering would be one of the modern styles. And brush lettering to me is just, it's fun. It's the most fun you can have with writing. It's very flowy. You can do not so flowy. Like this is brush lettering. It's just it's normal print. There's no cursive look in there at all. This one is also brush lettering. A little bit pale here because this is a blended one. That is, all the letters are kind of connecting, same pens. So that's done with big tombos, that's with the small zebra pen. This is done with big tombos, small tombos, but that's all the brush lettered style, where you take a brush pen and you write with it. This one is also brush lettering, although it's individual capital letters here. It's done with a brush pen, and you need to know where to apply pressure. So your brush pen is going to give you thick and thin, and that is what makes it brush lettering. So brush lettering doesn't have to be this style like that. Does not have to look like this. You don't have to do a cursive style. You can absolutely do this style or this type of thing. So brush lettering just means you're using a brush pen to write with. These are also examples of brush lettering. So this one I had on Instagram recently. That is done with Tombos and it's blended. So it's a very light pen. You write the whole word in a light pen and then you do your blending at the top. So the nice thing about these big brush pens is they are water soluble, so you can blend them. And blending is when you take your blender pen, which is the colorless blender pen. It looks white, but it's got no color in it. And the blender pens always have a clear lid. So if you see a pen like this and you think, oh, it's a white calligraphy pen, it's not. It's a blender pen. Clear lid means blender. Those are the pens you would need for doing any of these sort of blended styles. So all of this is brush lettering. There's another one that's blended. This at the bottom looks more like print, but it's also brush lettering. And this here is white. This is an actual white brush pen on black card. So it's a Kelly Creates white brush pen. Again, this is a brush lettered style. A cursive style, but you're linking your letters together. So you're not actually writing in cursive. And I have people, especially teenagers and young adults who haven't done cursive at school. They'll say, oh, but I can't do cursive. How am I going to do brush lettering? Actually, that's perfect because you're not doing cursive. You're creating a cursive look by joining your letters together. And your letters themselves are made up out of pieces. So you're not even doing a complete N. You're doing a piece and then another piece. Join together, makes an N, and then you join it onto your other letters. So it's not a true cursive style. This is another example. There's some brush lettering, some more brush lettering, and then there's my own handwriting. So even on something like this, I've just got my normal handwriting, brush lettering. You can mix it all together. This is brush lettering with a little bit of brush lettering underneath. So it works quite nicely when you're mixing your styles up, but you can see why this would be a more modern, fun style than the more rigid, structured, traditional styles. Then this one is also brush lettering. Totally different look to this one, which is big and flowy and has a very specific look. And then this one has a very specific look, very chunky, very, very narrow, and very, I'm not sure if it's easy to read or not. People have told me it's difficult to read. I actually saw this somewhere on Instagram and I thought, wow, that's quite a cool style. And I copied it just to see how it would look. And it's quite difficult to write that condensed and that tall because it's not like Gothic where you're forming this piece and then that piece. You still have the flow. For instance, on that D, you're still going from there, round, up, down, round. So you're still having the curves, but very condensed and very high. And once you get the hang of it, it's actually quite fun. But again, it's a brush lettering style. And just out of interest, if you look at the Y on this one, and then you look at the Y on this one, I've used the same Y. Clearly, I like that Y. But here it is in brush lettering, and here it is in my traditional style. If you go and look in a book on italics, like that book I showed you now, the one that's got italics and a copper plate, I can promise you now, you are not going to find that Y because it's like a sort of stylized kind of version that I've sort of made up. That Y is far too flowy to be a true italic Y. So when I teach italics, I'll teach you the basics and how they're supposed to look, and then I also encourage you to bring in your own styles because why would you not want to do a Y like that? It looks amazing. It's got this beautiful flow. It's got this lovely loop through, but that you're not going to find in a true italic style. The Y is going to be a lot more boring. It'll be a kind of version of that with a much smaller tail. Okay, so you can definitely cross over your lettering. What makes this a traditional style is the fact that it's done with a chisel end pen, a nib that's got a flat, a pen that's got a flat nib versus the brush pen, which has got the flexible nib. And you can see it's giving you that beautiful sort of soft, thick to thin without the structure and rigidity of the style. Okay, so that is some brush lettering. I have more brush lettering. Just guys, I'm surrounded by by stuff. I'm going to drown under all these pens and things here. All right, so I'm going to put away these ones. These are all blended blended styles. When you're doing brush lettering and you're blending like this, you need the right paper. So you can't do that on just any old paper. Then just to show you what hand lettering is. So hand lettering is, because that's where it gets very confusing. People, they just hear lettering and then it's brush lettering, hand lettering. Like, what is the difference? So something like hand lettering is, you'd use that quite a lot for signage, for writing. So this, for instance, this was from when I did, this was about 3 years ago, I did my first hand lettering workshop. So I just wrote that out. And that is hand lettering. That is done with a normal fine liner, not a brush pen. So hand lettering is where you are literally drawing your letters with a fine liner or any kind of pen. So monoline. So when I say fine line, I mean, you get quite fat fine liners, but it's a monoline pen versus a brush pen. So monoline is going to obviously give you a single thickness of line. And a brush pen is going to, because it's flexible, it's going to give you a softer, you know, that thick, thin look. So I have some more examples here. Okay, so hand lettering would be this, where I've written out. So it's kind of a stylized version of my own writing. And then there's, I've done that in, I've outlined, well, I've created a space to color in. So I would have done it in pencil first, then outlined my letter and then colored it in. This is also hand lettering. This one has got flag. I haven't colored this one in because it's a sample for a workshop. So I also have uncolored samples. This one is also hand lettering. So is this one. So these two are, this is colored in, this is not. This is a fake lettered style. So if you look at this, this is where it gets confusing, because then people say, but that looks just like your brush lettering. So does this one. This looks exactly like my personal brush lettering style. And it is, because I do brush lettering. And when I did this, I did it in the same style as my own brush lettering. So when you look at this, you'd be forgiven for thinking, but hang on, what is going on here? This one looks as if I've done green lettering and I've outlined it. And then I've drawn my letters and I've colored it in. What actually happened here is I wrote this out in a fake lettered style. So this is fake calligraphy. And fake calligraphy is where you are doing, and fake calligraphy is a hand lettering style. It's not a brush lettering style because you're not using a brush. You are just lettering. So this over here, this is all hand lettering. But there are 3 different styles on here. So there's this very tall, very skinny capital style. Then there's this also kind of tall, but you could go chunkier and wider with this, but this is all lowercase. That's the uppercase, very narrow ones. And then this is fake lettering, fake calligraphy over here. So all that I've done here is I've left them open as opposed to coloring them in here. So this one I did first, and this one and quite a few of my others, there are videos on YouTube. So I have a YouTube channel, not because I want to be famous. I still can't get over I have a YouTube channel. This video will go on that channel. For me, it's a collection of videos. It's a place to keep them, but it still sounds very influencery. So this video I put it on because so many times people don't know how to do this and they don't know how to color it in. So this is colored in with ironically brush pens, but I used them just to color in. I didn't do any brush lettering on here, but it gives you the look of brush lettering. And that is why it's known as fake calligraphy, because you are faking that second line, faking the thick downstroke and faking the whole look of calligraphy. People get upset and say, I don't want to learn fake calligraphy. I want to learn real calligraphy. So this is its own style. And I teach this in workshops. I do Zoom classes. I do real classes for this style. And it has a place. And it's not only because you're not confident to do brush lettering. Fake calligraphy is really nice for things like, now you want to put a big word up on your wall. You want to paint a nice big word. Or you're wanting to do some signage, some big signs, you're working in paint or paint markers, or you're doing gift bags and you're taking quite a shiny gift bag and you're using something like a paint marker, like one of these. So this is anything that has that sound is a paint marker, by the way. It has a little ball inside to mix the paint. This is a white one, and this is a black one. There are also silver and gold ones. They're different brands. So if you do a hand lettering or one of my gift wrap or gifts classes, so like Christmas, Valentine's Day, I do a lot of Zoom classes for those, and I always explain all these markers. So there's a silver one, pilot one, also paint marker, paint marker. A paint marker has paint in it. It's not like a brush ink. It's got a bullet end. That is never, ever, ever going to give you thick and thin. So if you need to do something and you're wanting this look over here, but you have these pens, or you're wanting to write on a super shiny gift bag and you have to use these, then you have to do fake lettering. But you also need an understanding of brush lettering. So you need to know where to go thick and thin, and you need to understand the spacing, you need to know the letters. So it's always quite useful to do fake lettering and brush lettering, you know, as different courses, but it gives you an understanding of both. So something like this, I've done the hacienda in, that is like sort of typical hand lettering, but that is also hand lettering because that is fake lettering colored in black. So it looks like brush lettering, but it's not. Okay, so those are all hand lettering styles. This is also hand lettering where I've got this big scroll over here. I'll very often use banners and scrolls and wreaths and things like that. And there's lots of little curly lines. And this is a very sort of typical hand lettered look. And if you look at this, there's this style, that one there, that one there. And then these are kind of similar, these three over here. So there's several different styles going on over here. And the word coffee is done with these little pieces in the middle here. So to me, this has a kind of a retro look, and I like that look a lot, this kind of old-fashioned signage look, and it's very popular. You know, if you go to coffee shops and restaurants and you think of craft beer and all that kind of thing, very often they'll bring elements of that sort of old-fashioned retro look, and that is all hand lettering. This at the bottom, I happen to do that with a brush pen because I know how to do brush lettering and I use this pen, but these two here, that one and that one, are fake lettering. So I actually drew those out, colored them in, and made them look like brush lettering. That one is done with an actual brush pen. But if I didn't know how to do brush lettering, I could have just drawn that in and colored it, and then it creates this entire hand-lettered look. So brush lettering kind of has a place in hand lettering, but you don't have to know how to do brush lettering in order to do hand lettering. Okay, I hope that's not too confusing. But I would say there are separate styles. So this, for instance, is my Merry Christmas. These are all on YouTube. And I shorten my videos. I'll usually do only certain parts of it in real time. So a video like this, with the whole thing, including the cat and the drawing and the coloring in, would maybe be 2 minutes. This one as well, nice and short. And the same with that Hacienda Calligraphy. So if you are interested in looking at how these are done, they are all on YouTube. So you can see I had time over Christmas. So something like this is, you can see the fat chunky brush lettering look. That's done with a koi pen, which is very similar to the big tombos. That's this pen over here. So koi pen is made by Sakura, and that is a brush. And you can see the size of that nib, quite a big nib. There's my finger by comparison, quite a big nib. And it's going to give you this fat chunky style. If you're wanting quite a fine look, you can do this type of thing. That's the fake lettering, and you can get these beautiful thin lines. Very hard to achieve the thin lines with brush lettering. So if you're wanting that look, then the fake lettering is actually much better. Okay, this is also fake lettering, colored in. Here is something I made because I kept getting asked, and I put this in my workshop folder. So this is the difference. Brush lettering and then hand lettering. So these are all different styles that are would be considered hand lettering. So kind of open chunky styles. These are really nice for coloring in. So you can color them in. You can do little patterns on that Christmas that Hacienda Calligraphy. I've done dots. Come here. This one has dots inside there. So it's great to fill it in. You can put metallic dots. So hand lettering gives you a lot of freedom to play. It's kind of like doing coloring in, but with letters. Whereas brush lettering, that is written out and that is it. I can't change how the pen is going to work. It's going to give you a solid look because it's a brush pen. Okay. Then when you look at that all compared to traditional calligraphy, I mean, I'm saying that you can mix all these styles. I would be very careful of mixing very traditional styles with brush lettering. I have seen things like Gothic, like a very hectic Gothic word, and then quite a sort of flowy, you know, this kind of brush lettering across the you know, like the Gothic word and then the brush lettered word. Each of those needs to be done really well because you're now really highlighting the structure of the Gothic and the the flowiness of the brush lettering. But generally, I find that people tend to go for one type of style or the other. A lot of times I have students who try everything. I have people who've done every workshop, and I have to keep thinking of new ones because what else can you teach me? Give me a moment, I'll come up with something. But what generally happens is you will have your favorites, and you will probably buy every pen known to man along the way, but you will always have your favorites. You'll gravitate towards the favorite pen. So that's quite normal. But of course, we have to buy all the pens because, you know, that's what we do. This one here is the fake lettering, but you can see it's almost got that very elegant copper plate look to it. And that's what I wanted, that very, very kind of elegant, old-fashioned look to it. So that's quite nice to achieve with hand lettering. A little bit harder to do with a brush pen. And then there's just one last one where I've got brush lettering, fake lettering. But if you had to look at that, you would think they're both actually brush lettering. This is the fake lettering underneath, done with fine liners. Okay, so that is all of those styles. Now I'm going to show you just a couple of, oh yeah, one last hand lettering one. This is quite a cute one. This was done for Inktober, where there were words. And the words were, there happened to be 2 of the words in the month were divided. So I did divided, split like that with the zip. That was at the beginning of October. And then at the end of October, they had the word united. So I thought, I'll just do the word closed. So that's an example of how cute hand lettering can be. And I had to go and Google how to draw a zip. I know what a zip looks like, but when you come to draw it, it's like, okay, I can't really remember. So with hand lettering, you can add all sorts of fun elements. If you follow any of my work, you'll see there's often little cats and little designs and birds and things in my work. So I like to add those in. But I'm not really sure how that would work with Gothic, for instance. Maybe I should try it. Put the bird on top of the Gothic letters. All right, so are there any questions before I demo some pens? Good. Nothing? Okay. So the pens are, it gets confusing because, and I have done a whole one of these free workshops on brush pens, so that's also on YouTube. That ended up being a 2-hour workshop. The first hour is brush pens. So if you're interested in brush pens, go and have a look at that. It's called What Pen Is That? And I've also got a video on which brush pen is good for beginners, because people ask me, and people would go and spend all their money on cheapy pens, and really you need to buy the right pens for brush lettering. So the difference between success and failure often is in the pen and the right paper, and then the technique. But I can teach you the technique, and if you have rubbish pens, you're never going to get good at brush lettering. So where it becomes expensive is, for example, this is the Tombow color tracker. There are 108, I'll just take it out the plastic, 108 colors. You do not need 108, that's including the blacks and grays. You don't need 108 colors. And then everyone I'm teaching says, yes, we do. So that's just the big Tombow pens, okay? You really don't need 108. So, and don't let Tombow hear me say that. They'll say you do need them. A Tombow pen is a big brush pen. So the length of it is just the length. The nib size is what makes it a big brush pen versus a little brush pen. So these are both brush pens. That's where the nib of the big one starts. That is where the nib of the little one starts. So quite a difference between the two. The pen is flexible. So if you know anything about brush pens, you'll know that they are flexible. And if I write, I'm going to just flip this camera around quick, just to show you. And if I go and I write with the big Tombow, okay, so here is my big one. This is a gray one. And if I write with this one, you can see here, thin line up, thick line down. That is how you get the brush lettered look. So it doesn't matter what color you write in, all of the pens behave the same. Here's a pink one. It's going to give you the same look. The colors are just the different colors. Okay. When you write with these pens and you're doing a word, for instance, and you write, I want to write the word pink, and then you've got to go thick, thin, thick, thin, thick, thin. That is how you get the brush lettered look. So your pen actually will do the work, but the hand has to make the pen do the work. So if I just write and I do this, people say, oh, you make it look so easy. It is easy for now because for me now, because I've practiced a huge amount. If you go and write with this, you don't know what you're doing, you're generally going to end up, first of all, people think it's cursive. So they'll do this and they'll try and do it all in one. And then you can see where I'm going wrong straight away. I haven't lifted the pen once, and look at how horrible that looks compared to that one. So brush lettering is a series of thick, thin, and pieces. And it all comes down to the strokes. So if you're doing basic strokes, and I have a basic strokes, I think I've got the troubleshooting for basic strokes video, and that is on YouTube as well. So my YouTube channel is Calligraphy Joburg. Everything of mine is Calligraphy Joburg, because when I started, my plan was to come up with a cool name, and I thought, I'll just call it Calligraphy Joburg until I come up with a cool name. That was 5 years ago. So, and then at the time I thought, well, if someone's looking for calligraphy lessons, what are they going to search for? And I wasn't planning on teaching anywhere other than Joburg, because, you know, I wasn't thinking very big at that time, obviously. Now I teach everywhere. So, but it's everything of mine. Facebook, Instagram, website is calligraphyjoburg.com. It is all the same. And my number's on there. So please, anytime you want to message me about stuff, you are welcome. If you've lost the number, I know I message you all now, but anytime you can message me. Okay, so now I'm just going to show you with the gray. You can add in, just check the color of the gray. So with the brush lettering, you can do cool things like you can add shadow into your letters. So you can see that I've added a little bit of shadow. So you've got a lot of freedom. You can play. It just becomes a very fun style of writing. I'm working on horrible, cheapy school book paper just because of the lines. But you get all sorts of papers. I also have a whole free workshop that I did a couple of weeks ago on paper. That is interesting, how many different kinds of paper there are and what's good for different kinds of calligraphy. So this is brush lettering, nice and fun, but you hold your pen differently, my thumb, to how you hold normally. So I have also on YouTube, I have videos that show how to hold a brush pen, unfortunately only for right-handed people at this stage. So it's a great, fun, lovely way of writing, but takes a huge amount of practice. And you can see thick, thin, and I am making it look easy because for me at this stage, it is easy. But I can tell you now, if you're not sure or you're feeling a little bit uncertain, this is quite a hard style to just pick up a pen and start writing. You definitely do need lessons for this. And I'm saying that because when I started, I had to teach myself this style. And there was no one there telling me, oh, but you need to hold the pen differently. So you're holding kind of sideways. The pen needs to be in line with the page. There was no one to tell me any of that stuff. So I approached this like normal writing. And if you look at this pen here, just like a darker gray, you need to get thick and you need to get thin. If you're holding the pen there, look what happens. You cannot get a thick line because your nib is pointing in that direction. So it's going to come down thin as opposed to thick. And that's the main issue with brush lettering, is you need to know how to use that pen. If I work with a small pen, it's exactly the same. Thick stroke, thin stroke. Here are my, my letters. So there's my series of moves. My L is 1, my A will be oval, plus a back. There's my C, another piece. So far I've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 pieces, 9 moves for a 5-letter word. So that's the difference between brush lettering and normal writing or cursive writing. Cursive, you're starting at one end and you're finishing at the other, and heaven forbid you lift that pen during the word if you were taught properly. Okay, so when it comes to brush pens, oh my goodness, there are so many different kinds. I'm just going to flip this back here. So I'm not going to go into each brush pen type, but just to show you, for example, Ecoline, Tombow, there's a Quay, these are all big pens. There's the Albrecht Dürer. This is a Faber-Castell, the Albrecht Dürer. Very, very nice pen, big nib, beautiful pen to work with, very similar to the Ecoline. So if you've got the Ecolines, and I would imagine the Caron markers, so those Caron markers are, from what I can see, quite big and juicy. I would think they're similar to this. These ones are also, these are all big pens. Then you also get the alcohol markers. So alcohol markers are different to water-based pens. So Tombow has got quite a few brands have alcohol markers. So alcohol means it's a permanent pen. You can write on ceramics and glass with this, and it doesn't come off unless you scrub it in the when you're washing your dishes. but it stays nicely in place. And if you rub your finger over it, it doesn't smudge. So alcohol markers definitely have their place. These chameleons are also alcohol markers, very big pens, quite expensive. Don't buy those for brush lettering. If you already have them, you could use them, but don't go and buy them especially. So those are all brush pens. Faber-Castell, these are big ones. Faber-Castell is kind of in the middle. So their nibs are a little bit smaller. These are quite difficult for beginners. So for a proper beginner, you've never done brush lettering and you have these, always a tricky one. If you come to me for an in-person workshop, I actually give you these tombos. That's what I give as part of your workshop. For Zoom, people will often have these, especially ladies who are doing scrapbooking and Bible journaling. Faber-Castell is big in South Africa in those with those hobbies. So a lot of those ladies will have these pens already. That's fine, you can definitely use them, but so many times people will pick up one of these little tombos and say, oh my gosh, it's so much easier. Once you know how to do brush lettering, these Faber-Castells are amazing to write with, but you kind of need to know what you're doing. The Faber-Castell ones will have a B on the end. That is a brush, B for brush. In their pens, if it says C on the end, it's a chisel end. It's got the flat end, and that is good for calligraphy. So that is the brush lettering. Oh yeah, and then the little baby sizes. Just want to put some of these away so I don't get buried under more pens. Okay. So with the small pens, I've got a little pentel, and you can see how small that nib is. Very cute, very small. By comparison, it's going to give you a much smaller size. So these are really nice for beginners. And they're kind of like the Tombow one. So that was a big Tombow. Here is the small pentel. Here's me writing. Very, very original. I'm doing the color names for the colors. Okay, so I sell the pentels. They're very hard to get hold of. As far as I know, there's no one else selling them in South Africa, just because Pentel South Africa, I don't know, they don't think that we need them. So there's a little size compared to my big Tombow size. So you can imagine now, I'm working on grade 1 line, so that's quite a big line. That's a very much more manageable size to work in for a beginner, which is why often when beginners buy expensive Tombows, I think, oh, I've bought all these Tombows, I've got loads and loads of these, I bought all the sets, and then they try and write, and they actually end up destroying these pens quite quickly because they're big, and you try and write small, and you're pressing hard, and you don't understand how the pen needs to work. And it's not your fault, but it's because you're a beginner. That's where I come in. I've destroyed enough of these to know exactly how to teach now. So the little pens are great. If you're left-handed and you're trying to do brush lettering and no one has shown you how to do brush lettering, it is even harder than for a right-handed person because you are pushing your pen the entire time where a right-handed person is pulling the pen. So for lefties, Zoom is okay, but I always prefer to actually sit with someone and help them with brush lettering. But I'm making it sound like it's an extremely unachievable way of writing. It takes a lot of practice. I sometimes will have a 3-hour workshop and I'll have some annoying person arrive and they get it like that in 3 hours and then no one wants to talk to me. I struggle. I am self-taught. I'm self-taught in Gothic, in Fracture, in all of these styles, the dipping pen, the whole lot. The only one I actually did classes for years ago was Italics. And I can tell you now, brush lettering is by far the hardest one to learn on your own. If you don't have someone sitting there telling you, try this, do that, hold the pen differently. And it comes down to how you hold the pen. So that's why it's quite important that you get the right information to start with. So if you look on YouTube on my channel, there's a thing of how to hold your brush pen, and that explains all of that. So you're welcome to watch that, and if you have brush pens, you can always give it a try. And then if you feel comfortable to do a class, do a Zoom course. I've got quite a lot of recorded classes that you can do. You don't have to do a live class. And I'm not trying to sell myself as a teacher, but I'm just there's no one else teaching it in South Africa. So you can do overseas classes. There are quite a lot of people teaching it overseas. It does start to get expensive when you move off from the free stuff. So Happily Ever Crafter, Crooked Calligraphy, there's a ton of people teaching. They'll do a few free classes and then you need to pay, and it's in dollars, and that's where it starts to get pricey. So a lot of my students are coming from the place of doing the free classes, and then they start looking for someone local and then they end up with me. So okay, so just moving on to the calligraphy styles, or the calligraphy pens. Just want to show you. So I work with Lammies, and because to me they are the easiest, most useful, most stress-free fountain pens. From years and years ago, when I did my first class, first workshop, or first course, I was, I think, 21 or 22. So that was a very long time ago. This is an Osmoroid. This is my Osmoroid. It's a British brand. You can't get it in South Africa anymore. It's still around, but you can't buy it here. Osmoroid, it's a great pen. This one doesn't have ink in at the moment, but if I put ink in and wrote with it now, 20 something years later, it will write perfectly. The other one that is quite good, these old ones, is the Schaefer. This is quite a recognizable one. It's got that little ball on the end there. You got them in red, in black, and in the blue. I'm not sure about other colors, but I have seen a clear one, but I think that was a newer one. But these ones, I think everyone's gran or aunt or whatever, or mom has one of these. They've kind of been around for forever. Also really, really nice pens to use. The reason I started using dummies is because the new Schaefer, so this one's old. This one, I don't know how old it is. This was given to me by my boss, whose mother owned it. It is years and years old. This pen writes like a dream. You put ink in it. If it gets, all these old pens, when they get a little bit gungy on the end, you just take them apart and you, this one has a little ink cartridge in it, but you take everything apart, soak it in water, swish it around in the water for maybe 20 minutes, half an hour, rinse it out. You'll see all this old gungy ink will come out. Put it together, put some new ink in. And unless the nib has actually been damaged, like maybe somebody dropped it or used it as a screwdriver, heaven forbid, these pens will work. Years and years later, they will work. The Lammies will be like that in many years' time. But the newer Schaefer pens, some of them are fine, some of them aren't. I've had too many students sitting with me, struggling to, and then scratching, trying to get this ink to flow. And it's something to do with the nib, the actual nib end, where they don't seem to make them properly anymore. Whereas these ones are, they write first time every time. You get different kinds. This is not, I'm not trying to sell the Lammies here too, so I'm just going to show you. A Joy is a long one. These are the short ones. That's an All-Star, the aluminium one, and then you get the plastic ones. They all write the same if you have a calligraphy nib on the end. So when I say calligraphy nib, it's that flat metal nib like that. That will write in the same style as a calligraphy marker. So if you're doing calligraphy and traditional calligraphy, and you're wanting to work with one of these, and these are very recognizable, you can buy them in P&A. That is the Artline calligraphy pen, and this is the Pilot lettering pen. When I give people the choice of which pen, they will generally go for this one. I don't know if it's the green, the scary one, but they both write black and they write identically. I've never had a time where, oh, the Artline's better, the Pilot's rubbish, or vice versa. They both write the same. Copic also do the multi-liner. So Copic do, these multi-liners come in fine liner size, and they do a calligraphy nib. This is quite a wide one. So this one I would use for Gothic, or I would use it for Zoom classes where I am demoing letters and I need to write big. But all of them will write in the same style. They've got the flat end. If you're wanting calligraphy markers, the Faber-Castell markers are also amazing. They do beautiful markers. So these would be useful for any of those traditional calligraphy styles that I showed you. So the Gothic, the Uncials, there's foundational bookhand. I didn't show you that, but that's quite a sort of rounded, chunky kind of style. There's the Italic Style. All of those will write, you'll write with these. I'm going to just show you quick how that looks. And I'm writing with this big Copic one just so you can see. So the difference here between the brush lettering and the Italic Style, if you are writing and I'm just going to do an H just so that you can see. So here is a brush lettered H. I haven't done it in the lines, I've just done it. Here is, I'm going to do them quite big. Here is an Italic H, just by comparison. Okay. Thick and thin, but this one is going to give you thick and thin in very specific places because I'm working with a chisel end, thin up, thick down. Here, as I apply pressure, I'm getting thin up, thick down. If I wrote with this one and I just kept everything the same thickness, it would kind of go like this. Whereas on this one, if I hold my nib at 45 degrees, I'm going to always get thin, thick. Doesn't matter how hard or soft I press, the pen is going to remain at 45 degrees, and it will continuously give you thin, thick as it moves through the letters. So in that way, the traditional styles are a lot easier. If I was doing a Gothic H, for instance, I would do the kind of chunky. I'm going to do this smaller because it won't look good. This is actually a bit big for this size, but that's the kind of chunky geometric look that you're going to get versus these styles. So that's a flowy style. That one's a flowy style, but you can see if you hold the pen incorrectly or you try and use it as a normal pen. If you noticed here for this style, I'm holding the pen there. For the Gothic, I'm holding the pen there. There as in if I let go, it's over here, exactly as if I was picking up a normal pen and writing a shopping list. With this pen, I have to keep it sideways in line with my paper. So that's what makes it a little trickier. I have to then apply pressure. I have to know when to apply pressure, and I have to know that I've got to go thin up here and thick down there and thin up there. If I don't know that, I can't get my hand to move and I'm not flexible, that style is very difficult. So for people who are gripping extremely tightly and are very rigid and have very tight hands, this brush lettering style, although it looks beautiful and everyone thinks, oh, it looks so lovely and flowy, what you end up with often is that sort of look and very rigid. In fact, it looks more like this. And the thumb often is the culprit here. So you'll have this kind of like that. And that's often what I see. And that curve is the thumb pushing back. So if you're very tight and very rigid, that is actually going to be quite a difficult style to write in, whereas this style, even that style, is going to be a lot easier for you to start with. So if people ask me, look, I want to do everything, where do I start? I would always suggest start with traditional calligraphy because you're learning the letter shapes. My shapes are fairly similar. My N's, my M's, all of those are fairly similar across the two styles. But this one is an easier one to get the hang of because you don't need to apply pressure downwards onto the page. And then hand lettering, of course, will be even easier. So hand lettering, you're working with fine liners. And just to flip back here, there are lots and lots of different fine liners. So if you are working in hand lettering, you think, oh, I need the right fine liner. So pretty much any fine liner is going to be the right fine liner. Fine liners, sure, I have lots of different ones here. And so there's a Copic multi-liner. There's, this is the Faber-Castell fine liner. Here it has an S on the end. So remember I said the Faber-Castell's B is brush lettering, C is chisel for calligraphy, and then S or M or they've now started putting sizes on. So they've now got 0.3 on here. And I think, yeah, the bigger, I can't remember the bigger sizes, but instead of just S and M, because it's a little bit too wishy-washy. So I'm glad they've started doing that. So there are those two. There's the very well-known Pigma Micron, so this beige body. These all write black unless it has a color piece on the end. This is washi tape that I've put on, so ignore that. This is black. It's got a black end. It writes in black, but you get colors as well. And then you get Derwent. So this happens to be a purple one. Derwent is that one there, also quite a well-known brand. And then this is the Mitsubishi Pen Company's one. It's the Mitsubishi Pen Company. I kid you not. It sounds like a car company. Like, that's familiar. So I'm not sure if it's the same family. So the cars are good. So I'm assuming the pens would be just as good. And this is the Unipen. So Unipen, if you can buy these in P&A, they are amazing pens. The nice thing about all of these is that they are waterproof. So when you're doing hand lettering, even though I'm saying, oh, you can pretty much write in anything, you can pick up your kid's Koki and do hand lettering. The problem comes when you're wanting to color in. So when you do a hand lettering class with me and I'm teaching you all the correct ways of doing everything, the first and most important thing I will teach you is not to throw your pens on the floor, is to use a waterproof fine liner. And these will all say, waterproof, water fast, water something. Water soluble means it's will mix with water. These are permanent. Why that's important is that if you want to color in your letter, so like that, all those examples I showed you just now where I had lettering and I'm coloring it in. If you work with a water soluble outside and you now color in, you're going to pull that black into whatever color you've outlined. You're going to pull that into your lettering. So if you look at something like this black Tombow, the opposite end, it has a bullet end, like a normal, what we would consider a koki, which is supposed to be marker for the rest of the world. Only we call it koki. If you go outlining that, and then you take color pens and you color in that black, even though it's a Tombow and it's 70 Rand a pen and it's a fancy pen, that black is just going to go right into your color because this is a water soluble pen. So it's very important that you use the right markers. And then once you've got the couple of nice fine liners, you can pretty much do anything you like. You don't need any special talent for hand lettering. It's a really fun style of doing lettering. And you would do this type of thing. You can have your H. So I'll do biggish ones here. Like say you do, I've shown you a few of my examples. So here's a hand lettered H. You could do it long and tall and skinny like this if you wanted like a small letter. You can have a fake calligraphy one. You can mix them all together on the page. The trick with hand lettering, and the reason I teach it, is because people don't always know when to use capitals, when to use small ones. How do you know which styles to mix? How do you know, how do you even know when to put the thick piece in? You know, with most of us, if we just do a capital H, it's going to look something like this, like rugby poles. So what I will teach you is different ways of getting a sort of stylized look. You can do your H like that. You can take it up at the top here, your crossbar up at the top. How I would teach you how to keep all of that consistent across your word, and also how to know when to put a thick section in and a thin piece and a thin piece. And do you keep that second piece thin, or do you add in another fat one and totally change the look of your letter and make it look extra chunky and then extra skinny in the middle? So that's not going to look as nice as this one, but then how would you know that? So hand lettering classes that I teach all work around that. And then also things like adding a banner, and then a cute little banner would just be, you know, something like this that you add in. And then how do you know how to draw that? So I've drawn cheapers hundreds of these things, and I'm still getting it wrong. So I messed up the bottom there, but just the, you know, that top section, how do you know how to do that? So that's what I would teach in hand lettering. So those are different styles. The dipping pen is the only other one. I'm not going to demo it. I'm not going to actually dip and write, but that style is, believe it or not, easier to write with than, or to write in this dipping style than brush lettering. And the reason for that is you're holding your pen as normal. So when you write with this pen, you're holding it exactly as if you're just writing with a normal pen. With brush lettering, you need to hold your pen in a different style. You've got to hold it sideways. This style here, it looks scary because this pen looks scary. Everybody goes, whoo, I can't do that. I need to be good. I need to, you know, no, you don't. You need to dip it in the ink and you need to start writing. And that's going to give you, the pen will split. It will give you thick and thin as it splits on the end. So this is not a difficult style to write in. It is, it's just daunting when you see this and you see the pot of ink and you think, okay, I don't know how to do that. I have Zoom classes for this. So if you have the equipment, you can do a Zoom, you can buy the recording and it explains everything. It gets a little scary with the inks. This is a nice modern way of writing. I showed you those the white ink that's beautiful to write in. But it has a sort of elegant, old-fashioned kind of feel to it. So it's actually quite a fun way of writing, and you always feel like you need to write nicely, and you can't write ugly with these because, I don't know, it's something about the pen and the ink that makes you feel like, oh, gotta kind of lift my game a bit. So, but not a difficult style of writing. Where it gets difficult is the inks can get messy. You can end up with drips of ink. I always end up with ink on my fingers because I'm that person. But not as difficult as brush lettering, weirdly enough. So if you're looking for a place to start, you kind of want to do everything. Start with the traditional Italic style, and then you can move on to brush lettering. If only the more modern styles appeal to you, then by all means start with brush lettering, but then make sure you have the right pen. So these pens are the small Tombows. There's the two different sizes of small pens. And these ones, unfortunately, you cannot just walk into a P&A and buy those. That is the only unfortunate thing. But now in South Africa, they've become very popular online. So you can buy them quite easily online. And once you have the right pen, then it's actually quite an easy style to write in when we've got the right pen and the right instruction of how to hold the pen. Okay, so is there anything else that you guys want to know that I haven't covered? I'm going to kind of just touched on various different styles. Anything else before I end the class or end the session? Okay, I'm going to stop recording. Thanks, guys. Thanks so much for joining. And I will see you in the next workshop. I'm not sure what that'll be to come up with something. So if you have anything specific that you're wanting me to do another free class on, then yeah, send me ideas, because I'm always looking for new things to do with these classes. Okay, thanks, guys. Bye.